we're replacing the front wheel hub bearings on this 2006 Pontiac Torrent. The customer's been complaining about some noise, and when we checked it out, the front wheel, you're able to shake it up and down, which shows is a good sign that the front wheel hub bearings are bad. So what we did is we ordered a couple brand new hub assemblies from Auto Parts Direct to You. These hub assemblies are complete, ready to install. If you look at it, it's got the wheel studs already pressed in. The bearing is built in internal on these. There's no way of replacing just the bearing, so you have to replace the whole hub bearing. This one also comes with a new ABS sensor already installed, and so basically it's just a matter of unbolting the old one and installing the new one. So we'll show you how that goes. Alright, since we already have the wheel off, I have the hub assembly turned, or I'm sorry, the whole spindle turned so we can access the bolts on the back of the brakes a little bit easier. First thing we want to do is just break loose the two bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket. Once you get those out, the caliper will come right off. Now you're going to want to either bungee this up out of the way because you don't want to let the caliper hang on this brake hose. On this car, it's got a pretty good little spot right here. I can just rest it here, and there's no tension on that brake hose. Putting tension on that brake hose can cause it to, it breaks it apart on the inside, which will cause braking problems. So once we have that out of the way, next thing to do is unbolt the caliper bracket, which is held on by these two bolts. Once those are off, I'm going to get this brake rotor off. The hub nut. The hub nut is this big nut here. Now if you have an air tool, you can do this at this stage. If you are doing this without air tools, you probably want to break that loose with the wheel still on the ground, because this thing can be tight. But I've got my impact wrench, so I'm just going to take it off with that. Alright, we got the hub nut off. Alright, now our next step is going to be to unbolt the, unclip the ABS sensor. It's just right here. It's got a little metal tab here. On this other end, it has a plastic catch release, and it just unplugs. So unplug it, set that out of your way, and then go ahead and take this little metal tab off. Because that's going to come out with the old wheel hub. This is part of the brake backing plate. This is what clips it on, so you'll see how that comes off once we go to get it out. Now we're looking at the back side of the wheel hub. There's 3 bolts. One right here. One up inside here. And one opposite. I don't know if you can see that. Right over here. These are the 3 I'm going to take out next. Alright, to get these 3 bolts loose, you can use manual ratchet. I'm going to go ahead and just use my air ratchet here. They're 13mm bolts. Now you got to be kind of careful with them that they don't strip because they're really tight. What I'm using is a 6-point socket. The 6-point sockets will grab a bolt a lot better than a 12-point socket. So if you have one, use that. Just to save headache down the road. Alright, that's one. To get to the top bolt up here is a little tricky. One good way to do it is if you actually, once you have that hub nut off, you should be able to slide this axle back. If you push it back as much as you can out of your way, will give you enough room to get up in there. I'm going to show you that it's possible with a ratchet. I actually have a swivel 13-inch or 13mm socket here. Once you have that axle pushed back, you can get right on there. There, it's broke loose, and you just take it all the way out. Alright, so once we have everything disconnected, if we're lucky, the hub will just pop out. A lot of times though, like this one, you're going to need a little motivation. Another thing you want to note is the position of this backing plate, because a lot of times this will just fall off once you get that hub out, and it can get kind of tricky trying to remember which way it went. So on this one, it has an R right here. The R is backwards, facing out. So I'll just remember that little thing, and that way I'll get it back on correctly. Okay, after a little persuasion, this one is kind of rusted in. With a hammer and a crowbar here, finally got the hub loose. Now my axle popped back in. You want to be careful doing this. You don't want to damage the threads on the axle here. But a little tap right in the center of the axle. Alright, once you get the axle free again, you'll see it just kind of all falls apart. Unwind your ABS sensor from the thing. You can even kind of hang it back there so you remember which way it went. Alright, we've got the old bearing out. Now, next step I'm going to do is clean the inside of the steering knuckle. There's a whole bunch of corrosion. You can feel it. It's actually a raised surface in here, and you want that to be fairly smooth so the new bearing sits in there well. You can either use an air tool. I've just got a little knife, which we use a scraper here. You just want to go around, and you'll see this corrosion just coming right off. You just want to go around until you have a nice smooth surface. And once that's all cleaned up, you can be ready to put the new bearing in. Wow, look at all that. Alright, it feels pretty smooth all the way around now. I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of penetrating spray on the axle and where the hub's going to seat. Now what we want to do, take your new hub, get the ABS wire through its hole, make sure you have it in the same position that it came off. Get the axle lined up, make sure your 3 bolt holes are lined up. Now it's seated in, and all we have to do is put the 3 bolts back in. Alright, I got all 3 of them started up, so now we just want to tighten down. Just get them a little bit snug at each time, and then we're going to want to go back in and torque these. We got those 3. Now, next thing we want to do, this next step is absolutely crucial. You do not want to tighten this down all the way with your impact wrench if you're using one. I'm just going to run it down, but not actually let it get to the tightness. Once we get it close, then I'm going to switch over to my torque wrench, because you want this torque to be absolutely perfect. Having these incorrectly torqued is a major cause of these to fail. So I'm just going to run it down, but not let it touch all the way, and then I'm going to torque it with my torque wrench. Alright, I got the hub nut run down most of the way with my gun, but it's not touching. Still got some play there, you can see. So next step, I got my torque wrench. You want to look up your correct torque specs for your vehicle. This one calls for 151 foot-pounds. So I got my torque wrench dialed in, and I'm just going to go ahead and start tightening it down. When you hear that snap, what that is the torque wrench saying you've reached the right spec. So once you hear that, you're good. Don't go any tighter. Absolutely do not tighten it with an air impact gun. Alright, I went ahead and torqued these back 3 down to 105 foot-pounds. And our next step, I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the ABS sensor. It just goes back together just like the other one came apart. Slide my rotor back on. Next step, we'll slide our caliper bracket back on. Get these bolts lined up here. Go ahead and get those tight. Now you want these to be really tight because those are important. If you're going to torque them, make sure you torque them to at least 105 foot-pounds. Those aren't going to go anywhere now. While you got it apart, may as well check, make sure your caliper slides are free. You want to unhook your bungee, or however you have it hanging. Slide your brake caliper back over. And all you got to do is tighten those down, and you are done.